Hi, I'm Levon, I'm not a luthier, and today you can unpucker your buttholes because I'm not going to say anything political. We've got a fun project where I'm going to take a banjo and make it into something other than a banjo. So let's check it out. Okay, this is our project. It is a very gorgeous Tonk Special. That's a reference to the Tonk brothers. This is all real inlay, not decal. Let's have a look in the case first. In here, we've got a handmade wooden plectrum. Plectrum is just another word for a pick, in case you don't know. I believe this is some kind of string mute. I don't really know how these work. I'll look into that. A nut riser for a Hawaiian guitar. Another plectrum, broken. A handmade plectrum. Tiny key. Oh my god. It works. I can't get it out. There we go. Couple of little bridges, one broken, pieces in there, and this is a key for the resonator. Now, I believe that this is a Lang product, WM Lang, but I'm welcome to be corrected because I'm not a banjo expert. Loving all the inlay and purfling, but the tone ring, I believe these are called, is pot metal, and it is broken. And instead of repairing it, I have special plans for this banjo. Here's the ass end of the resonator. It is walnut with what looks like possibly a dyed maple veneer and some more of this beautiful purfling. We're going to use our key to open this up because we can't really reach most of the hardware unless we go in through the resonator. This is very thick, probably at least an inch, maybe an inch and a half thick in the center, so super heavy. The whole instrument is very heavy, probably like 10 pounds. I'm not sure what you would call this piece, but it seems to be codependent with the tone ring, maybe a resonator ring. I was hoping to retain it as an aesthetic element, but we may have to get rid of it. It too has many cracks, many faults in the casting material. So I'm going to take off all of the hardware and strip this buddy down. Let's start with the tailpiece. That's another structural integral element, is that the tailpiece attaches to this resonator ring. I don't know. It's also super bent, probably from the tension of trying to hold the tone ring and failing. And yes, that is mold. And yes, I am sneezing. Oh, I'm going to heaven. Okay, the dowel or coordinator rod appears to be a bird's eye maple. The neck, also maple in a 3-piece design. A rosewood cap. The rim, hard to tell with the stain. I'll have to look a little closer. Probably maple as well, multiply. Yeah, you can see some maple there with a walnut rim and a walnut veneer. Okay, I realize I haven't specifically said what I'm doing on this project yet, but I'm noticing that this rim doesn't actually fit together anymore because it's so warped. And so these cast metal pieces I will not be using in this project. I will be replacing them with other materials. That's your first hint. It's not exactly a hint, it's just what's happening. So far, the pieces I don't intend on reusing weigh just a hair over 4 pounds. So that's shedding some weight. There's still a lot of weight in the resonator, but I don't think I'll modify that. That seems shameful. The remaining keeper pieces weighs 5 pounds. I've noticed the mounting bolt for the resonator is, the nut itself is stripped out, so we're gonna have to replace that. Be nice to find something exactly like that. There's always a chance I have one. Maybe. So close. Wrong threading though. Okay, here are a variety of objects I found with the right threading. These have this sort of lock washer situation, but seems like a really good choice because then I could screw this to the dowel as opposed to having to figure out some other way to fix these other nuts. This may be sacrilegious, but it's gonna work. To rebuild the rim that connects these two, the resonator and the rim, to rebuild this piece, I'm going to need a circle that's 33 centimeters by 26.6 centimeters. I was just in my wood room and I noticed the $900 board of curly quilted maple I got had some fresh dust coming out of it from worms. So that's fucked up. I wonder if it's cold enough outside to kill them. This is the maple in question. Mother living in here. Looked it up. It needs prolonged exposure to -18 or colder. Not happening here. So heat or boron? Maybe? Borax? boron. I think I'm going to make the outer rim out of a solid piece of rosewood. I've got a piece here that's got some viable wood in the middle that's 33 centimeters. So that's where we're going to take it from. So to cut out my rosewood circle, I'm going to use this trammel point and a router. I did some test cuts here in the plywood, and now an important step when you're cutting a circle out of a circle or out of a loose piece, you want to tape it down so that it doesn't shift and get effed up by your router bit after it's cut all the way through. So I got some double-sided tape I'm going to put on either side here, holding the rim and the center. Another important aspect is that the trammel point is going all the way through the wood and into the plywood, so it too won't shift once the object is cut. There it is. Now I screwed up. I should have corrected the outer diameter before I cut out the middle circle. The middle circle is very close to fitting perfectly, so just a quick run on the sander will fit that to this rim. But the outer diameter needs quite a lot of work, so I might creatively tape it up so I can use the router to give it a better circle. Okay, taped it back in place here, put the middle piece back in so that the trammel is at the same height, and we're going to trim down the outer edge of this rim. Just as I was adjusting the router bit, I noticed that the rim shifted a little bit, so I'm going to go balls to the wall with the double-sided tape to make sure it doesn't move, because otherwise it'll be ruined and we're back to the drawing board, and that would be a lot of wasted wood. Now I just need to sand down the inside, get that rim to fit tightly. All right, it's fit tight to this rim. It's a little loose on the other one, which I think is fine. It's not loose, but it's not like, you don't have to force it in. Okay, it's kind of loose, so I might go even further and bind it, but it doesn't need to be like insanely tight. I'm still going to add some aesthetic elements to this and sand it down a little bit, but it's already 2 pounds less than the previous resonator rim. So the way I laid out all of these holes is I did a cross, and then I divided that by half, and divided that by half, and divided that by half, until I got this layout where they're approximately 1 inch apart. And it just so happens, serendipitously, to be the perfect spacing for the armrest here. So that's just dumb luck, really. On the original here, you can see it's going through one of these big holes and then through one of these slots. So not in the center either. So now I'm struggling to decide what to do with these holes. Maybe alternate between large and small, large, small, large, small, maybe countersunk and not. But I will start with the tailpiece hole and the armrest hole. I welcome you to be impressed at how tightly fit that is. I'm a little bit worried that once I do the neck cutout, that this will be too weak, but that is why I did the grain orientation this way instead of this way, because it would be much weaker here. And this, at least it's lengthwise, or whatever wise. It's wise. Now our first hole is going to be smaller because it's the tailpiece hole, and we don't want it too big or this nut will be moot. So we're gonna go for exactly the diameter of the bolt and maybe increase it one size if need be. Great. It's important you always use a spoil board when drilling holes, because then you won't have blowout on the bottom of the hole. Alrighty, perfect. Now I need to decide if I want to keep this width as the intermittent hole size and then have the every other hole be larger. This is a 3/16. It's pretty small, but I don't know. It's easy, I can just do it by hand. For the bigger holes, I'm gonna go out to the drill press. I did make sure to mark every other hole with a little pencil mark so that I don't F up. I am going with this 3/16 for the smaller holes, and then I'll decide what to do on the bigger ones. Okay, it's cold, so check this out. Yeah. We're gonna bust it out with the motherfucking Silcraft. Now that it's been warmed up, oh yeah. Okay. For now, I'm gonna leave the holes near the neck pocket, and after I cut it out, decide if it's got the strength, the structural integrity to handle another couple of however big holes these are, 3/4 of an inch maybe. Also trying to decide whether I want to put a 45-degree bevel or a round over on the outside of this rim, because it does sit very proud of this. So this happened. That sucks. Guess I need to laminate this with something else. All right, well that glues up and I decide what to laminate it with. Let's move on to something different. Sliced up this driftwood and got some very nice quarter sawn cedar. And the pieces that couldn't be made into Soundboard, I've made some quarter sawn bracewood. And we're going to use all of this to make a soundboard for the banjo. That's right, we're going with a wooden soundboard instead of a skin vellum. Ain't gonna be a banjo no more. It's gonna be a tenor harp. Now I wouldn't blame you if you were like, W.T. Funkenstein is a tenor harp. And that's a fair question because it was a failed genre of instrument from maybe the late teens to early 20s. It was most often perpetrated by the Lang Company, but there were a couple other contestants. It's essentially a round-bodied, wooden-topped tenor banjo, or tenor guitar if you like. I also have this here. This is a martinet, probably by the Lang Company too, but it could be by somebody else. Definitely not a guitar company. It's definitely got more of a banjo construction. And yeah, it's a tenor guitar that's round, but they called them tenor harps and they didn't catch on. I'm gonna start veneering this and hoping it helps. Round 2 of veneer. Hopefully it's smooth. Otherwise, I've seen people reheat glue on veneers and iron them into place, so I'll do that if I have to. Broke my bandsaw blade. I can't really imagine a less likely cut of wood to break a bandsaw blade on than a couple of millimeters of soft red cedar. But here we are. Okay, I thicknessed the soundboard. It's down to about 2 millimeters, which is pretty thin and weak for cedar. But once it's got the rigidity of the rim and bracing, I'm deciding now between ladder bracing and X bracing. Everyone loves X bracing. But still choosing. Here's what the rim is looking like. It also needs final sanding. I only drilled out every other hole in the veneers at the back. Still deciding about that. Actually, on the last wooden banjo top I made, I did more of an A-frame or a V style like this. Also an option. Well, to be frank, I don't think this top is going to work out. It's a little flimsy, and you can see I've got a little bit of extra bullshit going on here. I might have to start from scratch. Listen. I don't know. It still needs some finish sanding, but it's at like 1.5 millimeters now. Very rigid. This direction though. That's why I would probably go with the ladder bracing. So I'm doing the exact same process as before, but with a different, thicker stock. And this is a very pretty piece of cedar with lots more color. So it'll be interesting. Soundboard number 2. This time I'm going to glue it on before I thin it. I'm at 3¼ millimeters right now, and I'm hoping to bring it down to 2.75-ish. Here's what it's sounding like. Pretty nice. I made a couple of braces. I'm going to do a ladder bracing with a large expanse in the middle here. Maybe something like this. And now I'm going to go take these down a little bit in the middle initially and do some shaping before I chisel them the rest of the way. I was walking past my bandsaw and this caught on the pocket of my coat. My coat didn't rip, but this broke, meaning I effectively have no fence now. Now I put a very subtle radius on the underside of these, about a 50 foot, and it's not really going to do much aside from add integrity because it's going on to something right now that's very stiff, so it'll end up just being flat when it's glued on, but maybe overall will be helpful. This is what these are looking like now. I could make them more aesthetically perfect, but they're going inside the banjo, so I think we're probably good. All right, they're glued in. Okay, no idea what happened here, but I got a pretty good ding in the top, so I'm going to attempt to steam that out with some wet toilet paper and a soldering iron. Now there is some fiber tear, so it's not ideal, but hopefully once I have the top all thinned out, it will be less apparent. I like this new top, it's pretty. And yeah, putting it on at over thickness means that I can use my router on it without worrying about damaging it, because I'm going to sand it down afterwards. And clamping it to the rim was, of course, no risk of damaging it either. So yeah, next up I will use my router to trim it. Now I'm going to run a rim of tape around here to guide the bearing from the router bit. The bearing is supposed to prevent damage, but in my experience it always leaves a mark, so I like to tape it off. Okay, now we're going to rabbit it out with this binding bit. So we had the smallest little bit of blowout here, so we are going to put a smaller bearing on the binding bit and make the binding go in deeper. No problem. What's more fun than even more binding? Nothing. A little bit of cleanup work and then we can glue in some binding. Now that we're done with routing, we want to get this tape off so we don't mess with the finish. So get that off as soon as possible. Bingo! I mean, obviously the thing to do is to recreate this binding and purfling, but nobody got time for that. Now, I think I've settled on plastic binding, which means I'm going to use super glue, which means I don't want the super glue to leach into the wood, even though I'm going to be sanding it down significantly. So for some fun, we're going to put a coat of shellac on here just to see how GD pretty it's going to be. Oh my God. Goodness me. Pretty nice. Look, y'all, I already put the black on. I just put this medium super glue on and then pushed it in with my fingers. I didn't use any tape. Now I'm gonna do a cream outer. It's actually a French ivory. It doesn't match the rim, but it matches the neck. This is gonna look crazy. Okay, it felt like this matched this, but now it's standing out a bit. But that's okay, right? Tell me it's okay. I'm back in the shop and I ran this through the sander, the drum sander, to get down below the dent. And now we're looking like we're at 2 and some change millimeters, and I'm doing the finish sanding, and that's going to determine the final thickness. Let's pop that grain. I'm gonna pop it with some alcohol. Denatured alcohol. Oh, I ran out of space on my phone again, but now I popped the grain with alcohol, missed that beautiful segment. Now I sanded it once again with 220. Now I'm doing like a 600, I think. And then I will put shellac on it, baby. Now I am using a dark amber just because it's the only one I have mixed right now, and because I don't care. And maybe it'll help the binding blend. So here we go. I'm gonna dab it a little bit. Here we go. Okay, I took the bridge out of the case and I put it on a piece of maple to protect the top in the meantime, but the neck is pulling up, and I tightened that as much as I could, and it does not seem to work the way I would hope. You'd think those little feet would be on the other side to pull more towards the back. So I'm either going to make a shim right here, like make some rosewood pieces to go under the neck there, or I'm considering a partial bolt-on neck. I don't know, maybe that's crazy talk. Well, this is definitely part of the problem. The dowel stick is not in tight, and it's pulling out as I tighten the neck. Okay. I'd be telling a bald-faced lie if I said I wasn't tempted to take off this heel cap and run some hardware into the dowel stick to reinforce the joint there. I did fill it up with a hefty amount of glue. Now, because I fit the neck better to the rim and years of tension, I added just a nut behind the shim here, or whatever you want to call it, because this pivot pin is now further into the body, and so this gap is too big and this screw needs to be tightened all the way in. I also am going to make a rosewood shim for right here to maintain the gap at the top of the neck so it is consistent. Now, before I make a bridge, I'm going to lay out or figure out the intonation compensation required, and on the lowest string it's going to be compensation of 5 millimeters. Okay, having laid out all the strings, I know that I need to compensate 5 millimeters on the bass side and 3 millimeters on the treble side, which just means when I carve my bridge, I need them to be 2 millimeters apart. So my bass strings are going to be 1 millimeter behind the center line, and my treble strings are going to be 1 millimeter in front of the center line. And now I can decide what shape I want this bridge to be. Well, the test bridge snapped, and that was under tension, and it left a couple dents in the soundboard, which is always nice when you're almost done a project. I may sand the entire thing back down to get it pretty again, and also I'm actually not that thrilled with the acoustic sound. It could be a little more bold, which could be achieved with a thinner soundboard, but here's a little taste. I also need to make a new nut or modify the nut because there's some vibration on the first fret. But the acoustic sound isn't the only thing that matters. We're also electrifying it. Still choosing pickups, but here's some choices. I love and hate this Diarmond sliding pickup idea. It wouldn't interfere with the soundboard. I like all the chrome, but I'd also love to have like extra chrome pickguard. But there's also just the simplicity of toaster pickup there. It's another option. Or just a basic Diarmond Hershey bar by itself. Here's a quick sample with the resonator on. As is so often true with acoustic instruments, after you work on them, they warm up to their strings and string tension. At first they're a little green and they sound bad. This is starting to sound pretty good. But because I'm gonna have to do some sanding work, there's some smudgies. Oh, that's just a fingerprint. Because I'm gonna resand the top because of the slight damage, I'm thinking about putting some sound holes in it as well. We shall see. Woefully, this means I'm going to have to tear it all back apart, even though it's just starting to sound good. We're going back to bare bones, and we're going to refinish this top. This super dry cedar took probably 15 coats of shellac to even get close to a sheen. Let's see. Anyway, I want to get rid of those dents, and I didn't quite get below that previous dent. Yeah, so this happened. At this point, I put a metric ass ton of layers of shellac on here. Okay, before I add the electronics and test it out that way, we're going to do another little acoustic test here. And of course I forgot to wire in a ground, so I will do that now. Well folks, here it is in all its glory, the Tonk Special Electric Tenor Harp. The Diarmond pickup is floating just above the soundboard there to not interfere with the acoustic sound, and I think it's looking mighty friggin' handsome if I do say so myself. We're about to plug it in and do an electric demo. There is some interference coming from the computer to the amp, so it's a little buzzy. So I've had to dial back the treble a little bit, but let's see how it sounds. Let's say we have another little acoustic sample here real quick. Thank you for joining me. Thanks to Joe's Vintage Guitars of Arizona for this banjo. or what's left of it. And feel free, subscribe, join the Patreon, all of that stuff. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Thanks.